Hello everyone, and welcome to another Guild Wars 2 video. Today we're going to be going over what happened with the Origins of Madness Living Story patch. Now with this update, two new world boss encounters have been added to the game. One of them is a temporary one, and one of them is supposedly a permanent one. The permanent one is the Great Jungle Worm, which comes up and you can fight in Blood Tide Coast. He essentially is going to have, he has 3 heads, and you have to kill all of the heads within a certain time limit. It's actually a pretty tough fight, and you have to be pretty organized to be able to do it properly. The other boss, which is temporary, which they added, is the Twisted Marionette, which is in Lornar's Pass. This boss is much more forgiving than the Great Jungle Worm in that you can fail several times during the event and still end up succeeding overall, as long as the power level doesn't fill up all the way, which I'll get into in a second. I've not done the Great Jungle Worm very much. I've gone to the event a few times, and it's been a massive failure, so I've mostly stuck to doing the Twisted Marionette whenever I'm out and doing it. So with the Marionette, you have basically 5 lanes, 1 NPC per lane, and a bunch of players, hopefully, in each lane. There are basically 2 phases to the fight. Phase 1 is it's basically a lane defense. You're trying to kill all of the clockwork minions that are getting to the portal, because if a bunch of them get to the portal, it helps power up an Aether Cannon. And Phase 2 is your lane will be teleported up onto the platforms, and you'll have to fight a champion. The champion you're trying to fight is different depending on which chain is being severed at that time, but the order of the champions will always end up being the same. So the question is, why is this Twisted Marionette here, and why are the Great Jungle Worm? Why did that appear in Blood Tide Coast? If you remember earlier I mentioned an Aether Cannon. Well, basically the Twisted Marionette is there as a weapons test. Scarlet is doing all this thing in Lornar's Pass with this giant monstrosity just to test a weapon. The Great Jungle Worm has been brought up by the pounding of these energy probes, which Scarlet has put all over the world on the ground, which are trying to locate something, which we're not exactly sure of yet. Once you participate in the Marionette event, there is a story instance which you're pointed to in Lion's Arch, which will give you some good background of the living story so far, and give you it's actually some nice character development on a lot of the characters too. If you missed that, there's a link either in the description or in the annotation, whichever one I end up deciding to do, which will link you to a video I have on my channel of just that instance and a little bit of Scarlet's lair as well. Basically, once you go through this instance, in the instance itself, a Derman Priory person will tell you, oh, we found one of Scarlet's secret lairs, and for some reason it's right underneath the Derman Priory. And we didn't notice all of this time. So you go there, you end up having to kill a bunch of the energy probes that are scattered around to get enough to make an energy core to open the door. But once you're in there, you basically are presented with a room with 5 chests, which the ciphers that you were getting from the Twisted Marionette fights will open the chests and give you pretty good loot, actually. And you're also presented with a lot of items scattered about the room. Things written on the walls, things painted on the ceiling, just things left sitting on tables. It's a lot of little hinted stuff everywhere. So really quickly, I'm going to go over a few things that I see as probably being pretty important that are in here, and that'll probably be important coming up in these future living stories. The first thing is a table right to the left when you enter the room. As you can see on this table, there's a little model of one of the energy probes, and there's also a diagram showing the energy probe supposedly probably hitting the ground and shockwaves being sent out. And it's looking for something. Another important thing to note is the picture that's on the wall behind it. It looks like a drill device, which will come up again a little bit later inside of this instance. And we've moved on to the next little area of the room. First thing I want you to notice is the weird looking plant thing on the table. This plant is actually one of the plants that was found on South Sun that Canuck used to drive all of the Karka and random wildlife insane. I'll go ahead and throw up a picture of one of them from South Sun really quick so you can see and compare it. It is the same plant as what's found there. To the right of that, we have one of the antitoxin injectors, which Marjorie was able to make to use in the Tower of Nightmares to eventually destroy it. And on the back of the wall, if you notice, there's a weird looking eye, a red eye with a bunch of lines coming out of it. Also, as you notice, there's a lot of red paint on the wall, and if you follow this red paint along the ceiling, you can tell altogether it is actually supposed to be a drawing of a dragon. Now, which specific dragon this is supposed to be, or if it's a dragon we even know about, who knows? I can't tell from that picture. I don't know anyone who could. Moving on, though, over by the clockwork chest, there are 2 pictures, a very important note. One of them is a picture of an Asura with a big slash through it. I'm going to assume this is Omad, her old mentor, who she ended up killing once she became Scarlet Briar, which if you haven't read the short story yet, I suggest you do on guildwars2.com. It explains this and gives good backstory to Scarlet. The other picture is what looks like a tree with red briars around it. This could also be something from the short story, because if you remember, Scarlet ends up seeing what she thinks is the pale tree, and she sees the pale tree being strangled by red briars during her vision in the mists. Over in the corner room, there is a console with a chair sitting in front of it. When you enter into the console the keyword OMAD, which is her mentor from before, it brings up a display with 3 images on it. The first image which is shown is a picture of probably Lornar's Pass and the brand area, the edge of the brand. The second picture appears to be the northern part of Or along with the southern parts of the continents that are surrounding it. And the third picture, which is very important to notice, shows a picture of the Lion's Arch area along with 4 X's being drawn on it. One looking like it's over the Dermot Priory, one looking like it's over the Vigil Keep, one looking like it's over the Order of Whispers headquarters, and one within Lion's Arch itself. People are posturizing that it is over Claw Island. Another important thing to note is there are 4 arrows pointing towards the Lion's Arch area, one from northeast, southeast, southwest, and northwest. And the final picture, which is also just like that picture you saw back on the wall, is of a weird drill device. Moving on, though, there's one last funny thing to notice, which is this chart, which is found on the wall. If you see, it has a bunch of the minor races of Guild Wars 2 with a bunch of lines drawn between them. Most of the lines are redded out, but there are 3 lines which remain. One which draws a line from a Sylvari to a Crate, which is a Toxic Alliance. One from a Char to a Dredge, which is the Molten Alliance. And one between a Pirate and a Nasuran, which is obviously the Aetherblades. Which is a nice touch and shows, hey, she was trying to think of weird ways to combine all the races, and these were the ones that actually sort of made the most sense of all of them. So you might be asking yourself, what do all of these things mean, and why are all of these here? Well, the first off, along with what it says in Scarlet's journal, you can strongly believe that it is a dragon's influence which is causing her to do all of this. Whether it is in response to the dragon's influence to try and stop it, to try and make us better able to stop it, or to just serve it, there's no real straight-cut answer to that. But she kind of says she's looking for it. She's trying to go to it, which is what I believe the energy probe would probably be trying to do, either lure it to her or get her to it, along with the drill. This could tie in with the pictures as well, because if she's trying to work with the dragon, then where would you want to strike first? You would want to strike at the members of the Pact, and you'd want to strike at the city that it's all been operating out of, where all of the races have come together, which is all 3 of the Pact members, or the Orders, and Lion's Arch. Now the question remains, though, which dragon is she trying to go after? The main ones that people are considering are mostly Mordremoth, which is the jungle dragon, if you don't know that, and Primordius are the 2 that most people are thinking. A lot of the evidence behind Primordius is the fact that all of these energy probes are all over the place. They're trying to sound out where Primordius is, and then the giant drill device is going to be used to actually get down there to him. The evidence for Mordremoth mostly revolves around the constant appearance of these red thorns ideas, and also the fact that she's a Sylvari in the first place. It's also important to note that, once again, this thing from South Sun showed up. This weird biological thing, which we don't really know where it came from, and it was able to basically craze an entire island's wildlife that's still affecting it to this day. Could that be dragon corruption? And could she be using that to try and figure out how to counteract it or to use it? I don't know. Oh, and one thing I also forgot to mention, that support for Primordius is apparently that pick drawing of the eye. I personally did not play Guild Wars 1, but people who did say it reminds them a lot of the Eye of Primordius you saw during the Guild Wars 1 story. The red thorns shown on the tree, along with the picture of Omad, I think are throwbacks to the short story, along with reminding us that the vision from the mists happened. So, where does all of this go from here? We know the next Living Story update is going to be inside of the mists. It's going to be at the edge of the mists. So the question is, what does Scarlet want in the mists that she would end up sending her Aetherblades in there for? Is it possible that what she's even hunting is not a dragon in the first place, but something she saw in the mists that's still in the mists? Because she was basically put into the mists from Omad's machine. That's where she had her old vision, which drove her cuckoo. That's something that I can't really be sure of until the update itself comes out, but we can know for certain we are going into the mists, and Scarlet is going into the mists as well. One other thing to note is on the picture of Lion's Arch, there are 4 red arrows. If you think about where are the dragons right now? So from Lion's Arch, directly southeast would be the Crystal Desert, which would be where Krakatoric is. Northeast would be where Jormag is. Southwest goes out into the ocean and would probably be the Deep Sea Dragon. Or if maybe Zaitan, if it's including Zaitan on the picture, even though Zaitan is of course dead at this time in the story. And northwest could either be where Primordus is, because we're not really sure where he is, or into the Maguma Wastes, which is where the jungle dragon would be. So is this trying to actually pull minions from a lot of the dragons all together in Lion's Arch? Is it possible that she's trying to actually take the magical energy through these probes, find the ley lines, and direct it to Lion's Arch? You know dragons basically devour magic. If you were able to concentrate a lot of the magic in one area, it would go to pass they'd probably be drawn to that area. And if you remember, I mentioned it in the last video, but there is actually a new probe which is in Lion's Arch, which is underwater. This probe could be very important, because this could actually be what she's trying to direct a lot of the magic to. So we could very easily see an attack on Lion's Arch by either Scarlet or by the dragons themselves if she somehow is able to bait them to attack. Either way, I think that's pretty much all I have to cover over this living story. If you liked this video and wanted to see something more like this, I'm going to keep doing living story videos, probably as long as the living story goes. And I have living story videos for every single one that came out in the past. If you want to talk about any of the theories, tell me something I missed, tell me something I'm completely wrong on, please leave a comment. I'd love to talk more about it. I don't really know what's coming up from this. I'm just trying to give all the evidence I can. And I hope it helped any of you out who ended up missing this story. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. What are they called?
So when do we turn off? When do we take off our armor?
Right now.
Now. Before that cutscene.
Too late.
So should have asked earlier.
Yep.
Yeah. I wasn't watching it myself.